Right, I am hitting the start streaming button now, but by the time I get over there, it's probably already gone live. So, howdy, my name is Matt. It's telling us that we are now streaming. Let me get in front of the camera. Hi, I'm Matt. Now, let's be honest here. Put your hands up if motors and props and ESCs and the combinations which they come in kind of confuse you. I've got to put my hand up. When I first started this hobby, is that I found this infuriatingly complex and some kind of wizardry that I just didn't understand. And I'm quite happy to report now, a year or so on, is that, well, some bits, it don't make that much sense. But to be honest, you don't really need to know the ins and outs of all the different like dimensions and things like that. There's a few little basic rules which you need to know about choosing a good motor with a good prop and a good ESC for the right model, and that's what we're going to be covering in this live episode. Now, we are going to do a little bit of theory. I've got a collection of notes here. Okay, the theory will really annoy the nerds. Okay, because it's not nerdy. It's all very high level. It's all Matt speak, if that makes sense. And I want to keep this very practical because I have got a whole rack, and you'll have to take my word for it. We've got over 15, 16, maybe about 17 models, which we are going to go through. And we're going to take a look at the motor, we're going to have a look at the prop combo, and then we're going to talk about the ESC as well, and what kind of things influenced it for that model specifically. So the goal for this live chat on motors, ESCs and props is to do like a little bit of theory at the beginning. Then we're just going to get in and I'm going to give you as many examples as I can give you so that you can kind of get these examples in your head and they don't become that scary anymore. So with that said, I do have the live chat working down here. Sounds good. I appreciate that, Andy. Now, there is a live chat going along the right-hand side of your screen. If you have any questions or comments, please ask as we go along and I'll do my best to answer them as we go through. Now, do be 100% aware this is being recorded live, so we leave all screw-ups in. Happy days. Now, we won't be talking about this model. Shameless plug, if you want to know more, Instagram, there's a link in the video description. Literally arrived today. So we won't be talking about that one at all. Right, what have I got here on my notes? Yeah, I really did find this confusing. Like, it was probably the same for you. Like, why do you choose one motor over another one? Why do you choose one prop for one scenario and a different prop for a different scenario? And it all gets kind of confusing. Now, you'll notice that I have got some notes here, and I've got some notes here so that I can make this as short as possible, but pack it with as much information so we can then get on and get into the real life examples as fast as possible. Now, annoyingly, that radiator's on, so I'm slightly cooking here. Okay, Teenager says 3 models or 3 planes under construction. I know that feeling well. Right, motors. Let's go again, keeping this very, very practical. And you'll see that in the bottom right-hand corner, or left-hand corner of your screen, is that I've got a top-mounted camera, and we've got 2 motors here. And you will see that they are, well, they look kind of similar. They've both got mounts on the bottom. There's a can, the metal bit here and here. And then they've got prop adapters, and one's got propeller on it, one doesn't. And we've got 3 wires coming out, okay? Now, the thing is that what would influence your choice on buying and then using a bigger motor compared to a smaller motor, when in theory that these could have very, very similar outputs of thrust, okay? So that is a very curious question. Now, I've got 4 examples here with me, and they are all good for their own different reasons. So I'll just quickly show the other 2 examples here. One of them is the Sunny Sky X22, X2216 1250 kV. We'll find out what kV means in a minute. This one's the Turnigy D2826 2200 kV. We'll find out what that D28 means right now. Right. Motors. What do you need to know about motors? Now, the simplest thing which you need to know about motors is that they come in different sizes. And as a general rule, and I'll try and give you like as many general rules of thumb as possible, which is that most manufacturers, because Sunny Sky don't, they've got their own measurements, is that you'll have motors. I've got two motors here. One is we have a look at that one there. You'll see that this one here is a D2826, okay? And you'll see this other one just here is a D3536. So we can see that one's got bigger numbers than the other one and is actually of a bigger size as well. So what do these numbers mean? Basically, it means the width, so the diameter of how round the motor is and how tall, okay? So if you see a motor which is a 3536, then you know it's bigger than a 2826. You can also get like 2812s, and you'll then know that, oh, actually that will be a much thinner motor, or one of these dimensions will be off. So it will either be really, really thin, or more likely its height will be a lot less. So I'll just put those two to one side. There's another really good example. I didn't think about this one. So I'll put this one here. So this is a D3548, and I'll put this by the side of the 3536. So you'll see up there on the camera, the can size is much, much bigger. So that last number is how tall the motor is. What else have we got on here? So dimensions. First two numbers means how wide or how round it is, or how big the circumference of it is, and then the last two numbers is how tall the motor is. Okay. Now, this is where we now get into something called kV. Okay. I've got four motors down here. One of them is 2200 kV. One is 1450 kV. That'll be a 2300 kV, and that'll be a 1250 kV. And you'll see that even though the motors are vastly different in sizes, which I've got here on the desk, is that they've all got, well, this one here has got 2300 kV, and this one's got 2200 kV. So which motor's better, and what the hell does this kV rating mean? Like I said, some of my terminology around it is going to annoy the nerds. And remember, this video isn't meant for the nerds, okay? So kV, what does it mean? It means revolutions per volt. So if you think about that propeller on here, is that for every 1 volt, okay, this motor is 1250 kV, so it will revolve 1,250 times per minute. Oh, and that model's trying to fall over, so you'll have to excuse me. Like I said, this is recorded live. So if you now think about it, is that a motor which has a higher kV number on it is going to spin faster than a motor which has a lower kV rating. Right, so there's one other thing, just one observation which you'll pick up. A low kV motor has lots and lots of windings of very thin wire. Okay, so after this live session's been done, do take a look at some of the motors which you've got and compare a high kV motor to a low kV motor. And what you generally find as a rule of thumb is that the motors with a very low kV have lots and lots of thin windings, okay, very thin wire in them, and motors which have a very high kV rating, which is, I don't know how well this is going to come out on the top camera. I hope you can just about see in there if it's going to focus, is that you'll see in there in the high kV motor, the actual wire in there is much thicker. Now, I don't want to get into the nerdy pieces for this. I just want you to be able to take this away. And the simplest thing for you to be able to take away is that when it comes to kV rating, as a rule of thumb, you would want a lower kV rating for FPV or endurance flying. And because it's lower kV, as a general rule, again, we're assuming that we're comparing almost apples for apples on can size and motor size. Obviously, if you've got a low kV motor and it's like the size of a washing machine motor, it's going to take more amps to get it to spin. But generally speaking, like for like, is that a lower kV motor is going to draw less amps. Okay. And that is going to be desirable for situations like FPV and endurance flying. Okay, whereas on the flip side, high kV is much more suited to speed. Okay, and there is a downside, which it does become screamier, and that's one of the things. That's one of the reasons why these 2205 2206, even 2207 motors become really, really popular in the higher KVs, is because they spin much faster. So they've come from a quad background, because on a multi-rotor you need fast reactions, whereas with a lower KV you wouldn't get the kind of responses, like, because you imagine it's spinning much slower, so it's going to take longer for that propeller to spin up, and again that's going to be crap for flips and rolls, you know. So yeah, there's basically two camps which you're going to fall into. You're going to have lower KV, so that's around about the 1250 kV or less rating, and then you've got higher KV, which is say 2000 and beyond. And again, I've got some nice examples of a mid-range around the 1450 kVs, which we'll look at a couple of models in a few moments time. And I'm looking that way because I've got a load of models over there. Right. Jake says, why are all my windings black? That's probably because you put too much current through them. Right, let's move on to the next topic, which is speed controllers. Now, there's some irony here for you, okay? Which is that if you think about your Lipo battery, you use your mains power, which is AC, so alternator current, to charge a DC battery. And then what happens in your model is that you have a speed controller, okay, which primary purpose is to take that DC current, and then it turns it into AC current to spin your motors around. So I've always, that bit's always tickled me on there. Now, we're not going to cover brush motors here. We are going to be talking about brushless, which is the motors which are generally used almost entirely across the board now. There's many benefits of using brushless motors, torque being potentially one of them, price is another one, probably the most major factor on there, and also efficiency as well. So let's think about a speed controller at the moment in our heads. And you know, when you move your throttle stick up and down, it's the same as moving your aileron or elevator or your rudder stick to left and right, is that like a servo output, you'll see your servo arms move left and right. Now the thing is that your throttle one is normally all the way down at the bottom and can be in it, and it always, you've normally got on a stick and it comes back down to the bottom. You turn the throttle off. So normally your servo is on the left for your throttle stick, and then when you wind it up to full knacker, whack, straight up onto full knacker, and then you come back down again. So this is done for a process called PWM, which is pulse width modulation. Basically, it means that it down, when your stick's at the bottom, it's about 1000 microseconds, and then it goes all the way up to 2000. So it's a scale from 1000 to 2000. Okay, and the midway point is 1500, which is your middle position. And that's the thing, is that's what your speed controller converts, is that movement, like a servo, from at the bottom of the pulse all the way up to the top. So if it's at the bottom, well, it doesn't do anything. The motor's not spinning at all. There's no output from the speed controller at all, in inverted commas, because you might have a brake set. We'll ignore the obvious there. And then when you whack it up to full knacker, that thing opens up the taps and spins up the motor up to full throttle. Okay. The thing is that ESCs are very simple. Okay. The one thing which there's two things which you should care about. The first one is the current rating. Okay. And this is the most important thing for a speed controller and for your choice when it comes to a speed controller. So I've got a collection here. So we have a tiny little quad ESC, which is actually quite nice to show you because it is so small. I'll put that up on the top camera. You'll see the little black chips on there. So they're little FETs. And that's probably a 20 amp ESC, which we've got there. And they're in two little banks of 5 amps. Approximately, again, I'm guessing on there, there's no markings on there. But that's a quad ESC, I'm sure you've seen those before. Then we've got a collection of other ESCs here. So we've got, and I'll try and get these all on my hand in one go so you can see them. So up over here, we've got an 18 amp ESC, we've got a 30 amp ESC, and then we've got a 100 amp ESC. And you'll notice is that they're for size, as they get bigger, generally speaking, the actual ESC gets bigger, although is the 100 amp 3 times the size? Yeah, thereabouts, okay? So the more amps which your motor and propeller combination is going to draw, the bigger the ESC. Now, the one difference which you need to know about when it comes to ESCs is that there's two types. Ignoring current, of course, is there's two types. You've either got quad ESCs, which are these little diddy ones, and then you've got plain ESCs. Now, what's the difference between these two? Well, quite simply, one of them has got a heatsink on it and is an awful lot easier to program using the beeps on the speed controller compared to, say, a quad ESC. The other major difference between a quad ESC and a plain ESC is that, again, generally speaking, most quad ESCs stop at about 30 amps. Of course, you can get higher current rated ones, but then they start becoming more expensive. So a quad ESC, you'll be very easy to pick one up at 30 amps for, I don't know, about $10. And it will probably work fine, okay? However, for greater current capacities, say like the 40 amp, the 100 amp, and again, I've got a video coming out in a couple of days where I kind of own up to how many ESCs and receivers I kind of own, is that with the higher current ratings, you will need a plain-based ESCs, the ones with the heat sinks or a lump of lead or aluminium on the lump of aluminium, not lead. I was wrong on that one. Lump of aluminium on the top, so that can help dissipate the heat. Also, there was a time when I said quad ESCs for RC models, fixed wing models, weren't a really, really good idea because there's no heatsink on them. I just want to retract that statement. I've been using a 30 amp quad ESC, and I want to stress this, in a highly ventilated area, literally on top of the wing in full flow, and it has performed very, very well. However, given a choice over a quad ESC or a dedicated ESC like this one, for a 30 amp fixed wing application, I would choose one of these. And again, yes, it does weigh more and it's bulkier, etc., but we're dealing with a fixed wing model, and generally speaking, we can have a higher wing loading. We've got plenty of space to fit this in, and it's not like a multi-rotor where, say, 4 of these on the wings or on its arms would make a massive difference. That's generally not the case in there for multi-rotors. And also, do keep in the back of your mind, on multi-rotors, there's normally a high airflow over the ESCs, whereas the ESC in a fixed wing model can sometimes just be stuffed inside the fuselage, and it can get quite toasty in there, hence the requirement for an aluminium heatsink of some form on the top to keep it cool. Brilliant! I hope we okay. I hope I haven't bored you yet or anything like that. Remember, if you've got any questions, please just ask as we're going along. Now we've got one more topic which we're going to be covering, which is propellers. And then we're going to get as practical as I can, and we're going to be discussing some of my motor choices for a collection of different models so that you can like literally take away, oh, I remember Matt chatting about the bonsai, or I remember Matt talking about a 3D model and he chose a different KV and things like that. So we will get to the practical example in a few moments. Sean says, have you tried the 66 amp Wraith? No, I haven't at all. It is the honest answer for those. And I also, frankly, Sean, and again, this is because I'm sure you come from a quad background, is that I also find BH heli very frustrating. I'm used to, for fixed wing models, to be able to set just using the beeps off the ESC menu to put the brake on. And that's normally all you'd want to do with a fixed wing model, is turn the brake on. That's the only setting which you set. You don't care about timings, you don't care about anything else. If you're a fixed wing pilot, the questions which you're answering is the brake on. And by the way, across the board, every single one of my models, bar actually there's an Edge 540 over there, has the brake set on the model. Okay, so as a fixed wing pilot, brake on, and can it take the amps? And that's the questions. There's no other frequencies or anything like that set up for it. That's basically it, because again, we're not dealing with a model which needs to do that, and that in a few instances, in a few microseconds. We're dealing with fixed wing, and fixed wing models, generally speaking, in inverted commas, always fly forwards in some shape or form. So having greater timings and things like that is almost irrelevant for a fixed wing pilot. So good question, by the way. Right. Ken, don't know the answers to that. It's the honest answer. You've just seen the question down there. It's all on there. It's all about the comment. What ES settings do you use for your fixed wing? I've just answered that one. just make sure it can take the amps which you need to set, what the prop and motor combo is going to take, and I set the brake. That's it. No other settings, brake, and then you're good to go. And that will work for 99.9% of all the models. I think there's literally only one model in here which does not have the brake set on purpose, which is a big Edge 540, which is a big 3D flying model. Brilliant. And I've just seen Lauren's comment down there. Right, now that brings us on to propellers. Now, propellers, I'll get these in the middle of the screen. Now, there are 3 main types of propellers, and you'll see that I've been in my propellers box to get a couple of examples out so you can see them. I'll also get one of these out as well on there. And tri-blade, I'll put those there. Okay, so this is where we need to rule out one type of propeller generally for fixed wing models, okay? So the 3 types are APC, slow fly, and bull-nosed. So let's take a quick look at the different types, and then we'll get into the details, the differences between them. So let's go and choose this. And again, I'm using APC as the general style. In fact, I'll put 2 examples up there. So what we've got up there on the camera is a 6x4 APC styled propeller, and we've also got a 7x4 APC style propeller, and we'll get to what those numbers mean in just a moment. Okay, so if we look at this, we'll see that it looks like a normal propeller, but the one bit for us to really take notice of is this outside corner. You'll see it's very well rounded around the outside edge, so it's going to be very nice to the air which it's chomping up as it's spinning, and it's going to, I won't go into the details, but it stops the little vortices, reduces the vortexes going off the end. You may also see APC propellers with an E on the end, and you may also see these with tiny little whips on the end as well. Now, the E stands for efficiency. Normally speaking, with fixed wing models, you're looking for the E-type propellers, the APC E's. Okay, so this kind of style, and ideally with the E on the end, because they're slightly more efficient if you can get hold of them. So that's APC. The other type which we've got here is slow fly. Now, slow fly, you may know if you're a quad pilot from the bigger propellers, which you want to, and you'll see, they're normally, if we put that one and that one to one side, so I'll put that up on there so you can see a reference. So the green one's the slow fly on here, and you'll see that it's quite an accentuated blade which we've got on there compared to the smaller 6x4 which we've got there. So slow flies. Now, slow flies are generally used for slower flying models like bigger quads or 3D models as well. So remember that one in a moment. And the last type is called bull-nosed. So these all kind of look, and I've got 3 examples here, okay? They all look kind of similar to what you've already seen, but the bull nose refers to the end of the actual propeller itself, and you'll see it's cut off short. So if you see up there on the camera up there, you'll see that those 3 different propellers there, the ends of the propellers are like being chopped off. Now, the background to bull-nosed is that they came around for quad pilots where they wanted the maximum amount of propeller, like width and the actual depth of the blade, in on their quads, because they could only fit in so much propeller before they hit the fuselage of their actual quadcopter. Now, the thing is that with bull-nosed propellers, they are terribly inefficient. So for fixed-wing models, the only time you would look to use a bull-nosed propeller is that when you're very, very space limited, and having that extra ½ inch on either side, or the extra inch in dimensions of the propeller, would make a big difference to the performance of a model. Okay, but generally speaking, bull-nosed propellers, not the best idea for fixed wing. Slow fly, only really any good for 3D models where you want to perhaps prop hang a model and you want the model's going to be flying considerably slower than your other normal models. So we can also put those to one side as well. So that leaves us with APC styled propellers, and like I said, these are genuinely, I've got grey ones here, I've picked out a white one because it's very similar, but the bit which gives it away, and I'll put that on the top camera, is that outer corner, and you'll see it's quite tapered on the end, and that means it's just very polite to the air itself. Right, we've got 4 different propellers here. That one's a 60-40. Okay, I'll explain these numbers in a moment. This one's an 8x6 or an 80-60. So those should start making your sense to you now. This is a 7x5 or 70-50. And then this one is a 15x8. Okay, so as you may have guessed, okay, the first 2 numbers, or the first number, is the width of the blade. So that's a 15-inch propeller compared to this one, which is an 8-inch propeller. So an 8x6, or if I put an 8-inch by a 7-inch, that should kind of stand out a mile. One of them is an inch shorter. All right. He says, or is that a 9x6? I've really bad balancing, really bad. I think I've told you a porky. Yeah, sorry, my bad. Let's put these up next to there. That wasn't. I was here thinking and going, I know that one's a 7x5, but that looks like it's an inch extra. Can you see on the end here why I knew I was wrong in my head? That's a 7x5. It says 7x5 on it. I thought that one was an 8x6, but then comparing that on, there's an extra inch on the end. So actually, no, that's a 9x6. So the first number, whether it's mentioned like 60-40 or 70-50 or 9x6 or 7x5, the first number is the actual width of the bullet blade itself, okay, from end to end. The other number is the pitch, okay. Now, the simplest way which I think about this is that the higher the number for the pitch, so that one's got a 6 on it and that one's got a 5 on. We'll put these side by side so you can see which one of these propellers here. This one's got a 6-inch pitch, okay, and this one's got a 4.5-inch pitch on there. So the higher the second number is that if you think it was your hand, okay, is that second number is how much it grabs the air as it spins around, because that's basically what the propeller is doing. It's grabbing the air and then forcing it backwards out of the way. That second number is pitch, and generally speaking, for every one, again, assuming under that was motors, assuming the motor for 1 revolution is going at whatever design speed it was going for, will travel for 1 revolution, it will travel that number. So this one is a 9x6, so for 1 revolution, this propeller will naturally travel 6 inches compared to this one, which will do 8 inches for 1 revolution. Now, when it comes to the pitch, the bigger the pitch, the more air it grabs. The more air that the propeller grabs is that the more strain which it puts on the motor, and the more strain the motor then puts on your ESC. So if for example, if we tried putting, where's that little quad ESC? So that tiny little quad ESC, if we tried putting this 15-inch propeller on there, it will spin it. Let's not give it its due. Let's give it its due. That motor will spin that propeller, okay? Not particularly fast. Well, it will try and spin it really fast, but we'll get it to spin. But the moment when we move that throttle up is that number one, we'll start overloading its normal, say, 30 amp ESC, but then we'll get to a point when we overload the motors. So when Jake said earlier, oh, all my motor windings are black, because he's probably had the motor either for a long period of time and given it many a hot supper, or he's overpropped and overstrained the actual motor itself, hence the windings are going black, okay? So don't think for one moment you can't spin a 15-inch propeller on, say, a 2,300 kV motor. It will do it. It will just draw too much current, and then you'll get the magic pixie smoke coming out. And this is why propeller to motors to ESC combinations are crucial for you to have a couple of common ones sat in the back of your head and available to you, so that when you get given a model, you buy a new model, you think, oh, option 1 will do this well, or option 2 or option 3. Now, in the video description underneath this video, I put three different combos in there, and I've missed one out as well, which was for the 1450 kV, and I'm sure you can look at the other ones as well. So there's 3 combos down in the video description, and we'll also take a look at some live examples. Now, before we go any further, I'm stood here looking for my cup of coffee, and if you've got a question, please just ask right now, because I'm going to wander over there, grab my cup of coffee, and then we'll get to your questions. Right. So I hope that kind of makes sense. Let me just quickly summarise there. We had motors. They have different numbers, and the numbers mean, generally speaking, the rounder or the bigger they are, bigger the circumference, or the diameter, and how deep they are. We also had that rating called kV. Basically, the higher the kV, the faster the motor spins, and the lower the kV, the lower the motor spins. We then discussed ESCs, and there's two different types of ESC. We've got quad ESCs, which are generally cheap and good to about 30 amps, but when it comes to fixed wing models, we need to keep them in very high airflow areas. And then we've got the traditional plane-based ESCs. They're bigger, they're heavier, and they've got a heatsink on them, which is great for us because we can just stick them inside of a fuselage and not worry about them too much, if that makes sense. We then discussed propellers, and there was 3 different types of propellers. We spoke about ball-nosed propellers, and for RC fixed-wing pilots, we're not really interested in them. They're only used for very tight space applications like a multi-rotor, which is normally not us in the fixed-wing world, and they also suck the amps as well. Normally not what a desired outcome. We then got slow-fly propellers. Remember those propellers with the big, fat, accentuated blades as well. Those are only ever really used for 3D flying. Okay, so that's those models which you see going skits in the sky, apparently. And the most common one is the APC styled propeller, which we've got one example there. And remember, they've got 2 numbers on them, either 70-50 or 7x5. The first number is the width of the propeller, so 7 inches. And then 50 is the number of inches of air it grabs naturally in 1 revolution. Now, those nerds out there, I'm sure you could shoot me down all week long on technical inaccuracies and things like that. But that's all the stuff you need to know as newbies. And I wish I kind of knew these bits when I first started. So, right, with that said, let's move across to your comments on there. Anthony says, Hobby King Plush are a good cheap ESC. I totally agree with you, Anthony, on that one. There's 2 examples of the Tonitude Plush ESCs. There's an 18 amp ESC and there's a 100 amp ESC. Really good ESCs, really good. The only reason I broke that one was in a horrible landing in the Mini Talon. Let's not go there on that one, but they are very, very good. Let's have a quick look. And by the way, you've probably seen your questions on there. James does not go there. Those of you who don't know the history, James has a fantastic history with setting fire to motors. Not necessarily his fault. I'm just sorry, James. I've just seen your comment in the chat. Let's have a quick look. What about these? So it's all about the comment. What about these ESC settings? Start mode, timing, cutoff type, cutoff voltage. Now, those are advanced modes. Okay, you don't really need to know about them. Okay, so just ignore them. We're not quad pilots where we're interested in reaping every single option possible to try and tweak to get better performance. Fixed wing pilots, you just want to turn the brake on, calibrate it, and leave it. Okay, which is actually one thing which I missed out, calibration. Remember we mentioned about when we were talking about the ESCs and that we had the servo arm going left to right. Okay, one important thing which I missed about the ESCs, calibration is absolutely required, because then that tells your ESC where your lowest setting is over here on the left and where your full setting is. Okay, if you don't calibrate your ESC, which normally with plane-based ESCs, the ones with the heat sinks on, is that you start up with your throttle on full pelt, plug in the battery, it will beep at you a couple of times, you bring the throttle stick down, and then that's calibrated. Okay, and then some ESCs you can then go on and fly straight away, or you may need to power down and carry on, and then power back up again, and then it's calibrated. And that then means is that you have like linear control over the whole throttle stick range or the whole servo range, if that makes sense. So thank you for pointing out that one. Apologies, I missed that. Right, let's quickly moving on to your comments on there. Right, seeing your chat on there. Hey Austin as well. Right, aha. John says, greetings from Sweden. Howdy from Bristol here in the United Kingdom. I made a wombat styled model. So if you don't know what wombat styled model is that it's a pusher one. So it's got the motor at the back. It's got two booms behind the wing and then a tail fin at the back. So John, I'm actually going to say hold off on that one until you see some examples in just a few moments time, because we're going to get to some real life examples and I'm sure that you'll be able to pick out one. Now, without seeing the actual size of the motor, what I would normally do is, like the wombat style motor for a wombat, is that I would choose that one, which is the Turnigy D2826, run it with a 6x4 prop on 3S or 4S. Now, just to give you a warning, you can run this 2200 that motor on 4S with a 6x4 prop. Just be aware after say like 30-40 flights is that the bearings may start to go on it, but you would have had 30 to 40 flights of fantastic fun. Okay, so John, that would probably be my suggestion for that one. Right. Anthony says cutoff refers to the voltage setting of a Lipo cutoff. Absolutely. Of course, we then could get into topics about battery voltages and the differences between Li-ion batteries and Lipo batteries and other battery sources as well, which is not somewhere which I want to go. I'd like to keep this one practical. So I've got a shed ton of models here, and we're going to work our way through all of them so that you kind of get some like ideas of why I've chosen different motors for different scenarios. So let's go and grab the first three. Right. The first one is the K-Fu, which I'm sure some of you know what that means. The K-Fu is a twin engine or twin motor model. My choice of motor for this model was around, I'm going to say, is it a 2204? No, it's a 2206 on there. So my considerations when choosing a motor for this model is that I'm going to have two motors on there. That means it could potentially draw lots and lots of amps, which is great in some situations, but not what I had planned for this model. I wanted a model with twin motors on the front. I would get a sensible amount of flight time, say about 10 minutes or so of flight time out of it. So, and I was also limited on prop size, so I could fit a 7, maybe even an 8-inch propeller on there, but that was probably a bit overkill. And again, CG was also a concern because this model's not that big. So actually, in this circumstances, for the K-Fu, I actually plumbed for a 2206 2000 kV motor. Now, these are the little Black Widow ones of Hobby King, and they have got the ESC built in. So I went for that for ease in this circumstance. So, and the other reason I went for a 2000 kV rather than say a 2300 kV, maybe like the DYS motor, which we saw over there, which I did own and had spare at the time, I could have put that on here, is because I didn't want too much of a crazy model, which was going to absolutely muller the battery. And I can tell you what, the amount of times which this model has fallen out of the sky because the battery is just completely dead on it. And I've had to go wander off and go and fetch it. I've done it at least a dozen times. And yes, I really should put an OSD on there and put a camera in there, which has got the voltage on it. But it's just so much fun to fly. And honestly, 10 minutes chucking this thing around the trees is just so much fun. So yeah, propeller size, having the ESC built in this case was a consideration. And KV was also a consideration because I wanted slightly lower KV so we had more efficiency, because don't forget we got two motors here, so we had a longer flight time. So we've spoken about numerous factors there. Propeller size, which is available to us, the situation that we had two motors, and also flight efficiency was a concern for this model specifically. So I'm going to move that one down there out the way. Right. Anthony says, typically the higher the KV, the smaller the prop. Absolutely. Right, moving on. The bonsai wing. On the back of here, you will see, and I'll put my finger next to it so it gives you an idea of the size. That is an Emax 1806. Okay, so remember we were talking about smaller, the can size. So that's an 18 millimeter wide actual can, or the stator inside, and then 06 is the height. Okay, so a small little propeller on that again. So if we think about the bonsai, okay, weight is a consideration. There's no bloody point sticking something that big on the back of it. That would just be crazy. We would never get the model to hit CG. So weight was a concern. We also had an issue with the prop size as well, too big. So that's a 6-inch prop on the back of there. So we're right on the backs of here as well. So size was an issue. And then we also want something with a little bit of punch in it, because this model was set up to just run 2S, not 3S, 2S. So with that in mind, we needed something slightly higher KV. So that is an 1806 2280 kV. So for all intents and purposes, 2300 kV. So spins lots and is great fun. And it's a great motor and prop combo. That's a 60x30 propeller on there, so slightly less pitch than maybe a 6x4 prop, for example. But really, really good fun. Plenty of flight time. We're talking 12 minutes or so before it falls out of the sky because the battery's gone flat. And that was my choice for this one. And talking about ESCs, it's a it's a 30 amp ESC which is sat underneath there. I've just had a sneaky peek underneath there. It's one of those blue ones which are apparently rated to 30 amps. Whether it would dish out 30 amps is something else entirely. That said, remember, if you wanted something with a little bit more knacker in it, that would be a perfect, I mean perfect candidate for like a standard quad motor, 2205 or 2206. Again, you would want the higher KV. You may, in this instance, I hasten to add, may want to plumb for a ball nose propeller so that you can get as big a blade as possible in that space at the back. And then run maybe a 3S or maybe even a 4S battery on the nose so that you can have a mentally fast, small little wing, which is bloody good fun, in short. So that's the bonsai. Excuse my sticker on this one. This one is absolutely nuts. So that is a RS 2205. Is that the 2600 kV? It is as well. Good boy, mate. So that's the 2600 kV. So that's 2600 revolutions per minute per volt. And I run this either on 3S or 4S. This model will do easily 100 miles an hour across the flight line. It screams its nuts off. If you think about on the propeller on the back of there, the consideration for this one was purely speed. Okay, there's no two ways around it. Speed and maybe a little bit of weight on there. So I went for the RS 2205, 2600 kV. It's got a 30 amp ESC on there. It's got a 6x45 propeller on the back. And it was, I got to go careful for this one. It was one of my favourites of last year, which unfortunately you can't get this wing anymore. They don't sell it anymore, so it can be my favourite because you can't buy it. Anyway, but that motor, that prop, it's very, very whiny, but family friendly. Does it shift across the flight line? Literally 100 miles an hour, easy with 4S on there. Absolutely bonkers for FPV. Let's get some more examples. Oh, more examples. It's two more. Like I said, I've got loads of examples for you. Let's start with the bonsai. This is the Bonsai 2, the new one from Hobby King, which they managed to tweak in not a good way. Right, on here, 60-40 propeller. It is a ball nose propeller because we're a little bit tight on space. Some of you may notice I've even cut out there to get some more airflow around the propeller because it is a little bit raspy. Again, this wasn't my choice. You can only get this as a kit form at the moment. So they've gone for an 1808. So we saw an 1806 motor a few moments ago. An 1808 is slightly taller, so in theory more torque. And that's a 2400 kV motor on there. And then it's got actually this one's got an 18 amp Tonergy Plush ESC underneath. and I've gone for a ball nose propeller. That said, I could have put an APC one on there, and I really should put an APC propeller on the back of there. It will cut the noise down, although it's quite a good fun at the moment, so I may just leave it the way it is. Right. Let's have a quick look from that. Ken says, I use mine every time on new builds. Let's max out the motor ESC problem combination. Cool beans. Right. Oh, Mark. Brilliant. You've been and raised a question. Mark says there in the chat, what's the difference with a pusher prop? What's a pusher prop? And I mean that as a genuine question. There are two different styles of propeller. And the issue here comes from quad pilots, and I'll pick, it's not their fault, well it is their fault. Have I managed to get 4 going the same way? Give me a moment. Right. Oh, that's annoying. I've got a propeller gun. Right. That's annoying, I don't have a propeller here to do it. Propellers. Propellers come, and we're talking about APC, or any of the propeller types here, is that they come in 2 different directions, okay? And the direction is from behind the propeller. So let's choose this nice big propeller, okay? And you'll see that this propeller, I need to get this right way. No, sorry, it's from the front of the propeller. I even got it wrong myself. So as you can see, this propeller is going to spin round that way. There's the edge of the blade. It's going to be cutting and pulling the air backwards. Okay, so looking at that model face on, that is a counter-clockwise propeller. So for this propeller to pull a model forwards, for that to come towards you, it needs to spin in a counter-clockwise direction. The thing is that over the past couple of years is that we've had quads and multi-rotors, and they've become very, very popular. And the default setup on multi-rotor is to have contra-rotating propellers. Now, we're not going to go into the details why that could be good or it could be bad. But in short, generally speaking, if you're dealing with a multi-rotor, you will have counterclockwise on 2 corners, and then on the opposite corners you'll have clockwise. So that means that the propeller is the other way round, grabbing the air the other way round, and will go in a clockwise fashion. So coming back to Mark's question, what's the difference between a pusher and a puller prop? Well, the answer is nothing. In short, if you think about this propeller needs to go counterclockwise, which is normally what you would want for a fixed wing model, to spin counterclockwise. It doesn't matter if this propeller is on the front of the model as a tractor to pull the model along, or it's on the back of a wing. It still needs to go counterclockwise to push the model to go forward. So pusher prop, puller prop, they're exactly the same. In short, APC styled ones, the ones with the little rounded tips on the end for fixed wing. So Mark, brilliant question. And the thing is that you need to remember is it doesn't matter if it's on the front or the back, you still want to push the model forwards. It just so happens that one's on the back and one's on the front. Hope that makes sense. Brilliant. Right, the next model here is a Wing Z84. Now, I'm sure many of you have seen my versions. I've had some very fast versions here. This one is not a fast model, and this one definitely needs a bit of attention because it's been on the shelf for a while. I have on the back of here, now it's a BR 2212, so 22 wide, but not a very deep model. And it is, some of you were going to be shocked on this one. Yeah, it is what I was thinking it. Okay, so if we're thinking about this model, is that I need a relatively biggish can to be able to have it free from the back of the model, because you couldn't put a 2205 on there without making some sort of mountain on there. It would be hitting the back of the model itself. We're also restrained by propellers as well. There's only so much distance between those rear fins, so we are limited down to a 6-inch propeller. Now, some of you may be thinking, all right, 6-inch propeller, maybe 2000 kV. I've already seen an example of that. Maybe even 2300 kV. Because again, some of you've seen those examples. The Bonsai, which we had down there, 6-inch propeller, 2300 kV. Kind of makes sense for what we've learned so far by looking at those other examples. Well, here's the trump card. That is a 1000 kV motor. So it's very, very low. It's going to be twice as slow, or half as fast as a 2300 kV motor, or less. Okay, so that motor doesn't spin very fast. So that motor is heavily under-propelled. We would normally want maybe an 8-inch or maybe even a 9-inch propeller on a 1000 kV motor to get the thrust up, so for us to get our model into the sky. But no, this one is purposefully under-propped on purpose, and that is purely for efficiency. This is my ultra, well, as light as I could make it at the time, light setup for a Wing Z84. I can, with a Lion pack in the front of it, if you can imagine 3,500 milliamperes of 4S pack in the front of there, you're talking an hour's flight time easy. And I mean easy with a model like this. Okay, so this one's not built for speed. This one is built for efficiency. And I can tell you, when you go to launch this thing, you've got to put the motor on full knacker, and I think it draws like 12 amps, something like that on full knacker, and you've got to give it the hardest throw to get the airspeed up and thing, and it ducks down, and then she gets off, and then you've got to go chasing the height, and like literally straight away to get the model up in the sky, so then you can go and get it to circle to then get the goggles down. So that is a great example of something which bucks the trend for everything which you've seen so far, and will probably buck the trend for everything which you'll see again here tonight as well. Right, Ken says, yes, Ken, you're bringing up a fantastic point here. There's in one of my boxes. Give me a second. Ken's mentioning a watt meter or a power meter. Okay, so watts are a measurement of power. Okay, you can also current meter, wattage meter, they sometimes get called as well. Yeah. You can buy these, and if you're ever unsure, is a tool like this is fantastic value for money. So Ken, thanks for pointing this one out. That is a power meter. And very, very simply, what you do, you put your battery on one side, then you plug your ESC into the other, like so. And of course, that ESC is probably in your model, okay? And then what you can then do, you can actually see the current draw and power, and what your pack voltage is also doing for your ESC, for your motor, for your propeller, and battery combo. So if you know that the max current of this motor is 40 amps, but yet you are pulling 55 amps at full knacker, you then know in the back of your head that you need to go very, very careful using full throttle with that motor. So yeah, those are super inexpensive, and it's just a simple LCD screen. Obviously, you'll need to secure the model, get someone else to hold it while you're throttling up, which a motor and prop combo, an ESC combo, which is using as well. So that's just like a nice safety zone. But generally speaking, for any of the combinations which I've got down in the video description, or which we cover here with one or two minor exceptions, you'll be within your limits of the motors and stuff like that. And actually, just for absolute clarity, that model, like the Flying Blade, the red and white one with a rather rude sticker on it, that one is known. I don't care. I don't care if I burn out the ESC. I don't care if I burn out the motor. It's overpropped. It's going to be stupidly fast. It's going to scream. And that's what I want from that model specifically, mainly because I don't care about the ESC. I don't care about the motor. And if it burns out, well, it's a great video, you know? So yeah, thank you for that one. Right. Mohammed, in twin motor models, what direction should both motors spin? Brilliant question, Mohammed. And the answer to that, it doesn't matter. It genuinely does not matter. I've got the XUAV Cloud stand there, 1.8 meter wingspan. Both propellers go the same way. I've got the Harrier, both motors spin the same direction. The twin mini Talon, which we had, brilliant fun, which then turned into a biplane. Both motors span the same way. No excessive, no torque roll, except, well, noticeable torque roll, and makes absolutely no difference at all. The only time you would, so going beyond that, so it doesn't matter on the prop direction. That does get us into a topic of differential thrust. The only time you would ever want to bother with differential thrust is maybe like the Bush Mule, for example, where you've got both motors on the front, and that model has a landing gear, so then it's helpful for taxiing. For a XUAV Clouds or a Harrier, it doesn't really matter, and they're all bottom fit landers, so having differential thrust makes absolutely no difference at all. Right, moving on. Three more examples. Oh, two of these are really good examples. And in fact, I'm going to quickly change the ordering on these. Excuse me for that. Right. Hobby King Tech Sumo, or Turnigy Tech Sumo. Now, I went through a load of different motors and prop combinations for my Tech Sumos. And this is the prop and motor combo, which I found to be the best. Okay, now some of you are going to be mortified by the fact that there's a 100 amp ESC underneath here. But like I said, I went for a whole collection of different setups. I went for higher KV. I started chasing KVs. So I tried 2,200. I tried 2,700. I tried 3,000 KV. I even tried 3,500 KV on a D28 36 can. So 28 quite wide, 36 quite long can. That motor would pull 87 amps. Extremely noisy, sounded like a jet fighter, and really wasn't much faster. What I ended up doing with the Tech Sumo, so we think about the Tech Sumo, so we are limited by prop width, sensible prop width on here, so I think that's an 8x6 which we've got on there. And we are somewhat limited by the battery, but running this on 4S with a decent sized pack, not an issue. So I had actually ended up with, and it's the motor which you saw earlier, which is the one which is not in the video description, is the D3536 1450 kV motor. So that's one of those rare motors. So we've heard about or spoken about a few lower kV motors, and we've spoken about quite a few higher kV motors, whereas this one is like in the middle, 1500 kV or 1450 as the case may be. That does pull 67 amps at full knacker. And for me has been the best combination of sheer speed to brute force to flight time and fun in the sky. Now, like I said, there is a 100 amp, and I'm not kidding you, there is a 100 amp ESC tucked up underneath there. I needed it because, like I said, when I put that on that that power meter, which Ken mentioned earlier, I found that it draws 67 amps on 4S on there. So I've had blackouts before with my original Tech Sumo. It got smashed in the ground because I put too big of a motor on the back, and it had a big blackout and it went smashing the ground. I was not happy. Anyway, I learned from that, and that's why I've got 100 amp ESC in there. Huge grating motor. And that is the perfect motor and prop combo. By the way, you can also run that on 3S with a 9x6 propeller, and it's just as much fun. Like I said, I've been for a lot of motors for the Tech Sumo, and that motor, either it's 8x6 on 4S or 9x6 on 3S, absolutely brilliant fun, but you must run it with at least, and I mean, if you're on 3S, you could probably get away with a 60 amp. Bigger than that, you need 70 amps or more. 100 amps are pretty cheap. So I went for a 100 amp ESC on the back of there, and it absolutely hauls across the flight line. Right, let's move that one out of the way. And I am trying to keep half an eye on your questions on there. Yeah, oh, and the Tech Sumo has got a very thick cord as well. There is like this back, I don't want to get into too much in the details as well. The thing which you've got to remember is about the wing, the cord, how deep the, well, cord's that, but the depth of the wing itself on a Tech Sumo is very thick. So there does come a point when you run out of being able to force it through the air because it's so fat. That's why a thinner wing section like this one, for example, if I put that motor on the back of here, it would haul. Anyway, this motor, this model is the right wing spec wing. You will see by the state of it, I've flown this model an awful lot over in the last year, or since I've had it. It's falling apart, I've got tape on it, etc, etc. Anyway, let's talk about the motor and prop combo. So those of you which have got one of the spec wings, you'll notice that my fins, or the right wing spec wing, are much further out. That's on purpose because noise is a consideration for us at some of the at the flying sites. So I've gone for a 6-inch propeller there. It was a 7-inch, I hasten to add. It was actually, what I was running before was the Sunny Sky. And we'll get to this in the mini Talon in a minute, because this motor and an 8x6 propeller is one of like the best motor and prop combinations I've ever come across. It's right up there in the top 3. Anyway, I was running this. It was under prop, so normally you would run this with an 8-inch prop. That's a 7-inch propeller, which I've got on there, 7x5. And I did have that on the back, and I've had that on the back for months. Absolutely brilliant. Now, I have been and changed it, and the reason why I've been and changed it so I've gone to the D2826 2200 kV motor with a 6x4 prop, and the reason why I've changed it is because me and some of the lads, we're all trying to get like evenly matched models so we can race together. So we've all got the same motor, we've all got the same prop, same or similar ESCs and the same wings as well. Going to be bloody good fun. So in this instance, I was running the Sunny Sky motor, which is the mini. We'll get to that one in a minute. It's a very special case, that one. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. You'll find out why in a moment. But for this one, it's built to a specification. Okay, so that's why it's called a spec wing, because it's supposed to be built to a spec. Although for the most part, completely bloody ignored it. We have the Stiffy wing. Yes, it really is called a Stiffy wing. Nick has some very fantastic names for models. His latest one is a tiny little wing, literally tiny. It's about that big, and it's called the Tiny Wiener. Anyway, the prop and motor, which I went for this one, no big surprise. D2826 again. I'm not limited by propellers here. I specifically cut the back of my model out on here to fit like a wide range of propellers. But the motor which I went with, and to be perfectly honest, is because it's got plenty of thrust, it's not too screamy, and I had several of them in the motors box, was the D2826 2200 kV motor with a 6x4 prop. And remember I said about the quad ESCs being in a high airflow, and yes, that motor is that ESC runs, and that motor and that prop on 4S will pull 37 amps, so I know that I'm drawing too much current for that little ESC, but that's my test one. I've been trying to burn that one out. It's not died yet. Very, very disappointing, but equally on the other side, has done very, very well. Anthony Gano says, why not the spec motor and the 6x4 prop? So we are not following the specification specifically. The Cobra motor is expensive and also will take a long time to get here. We've all got the Turnigy D2826 2200 kV motor available to us because they're only about £7 off Hobby King. So we've gone with that option. And it doesn't really matter, as long as all of us who are flying together as buddies are using pretty much the same stuff. That's good enough for us. We're not going to moan to each other about that. Right, moving on. There is and you have to excuse this one, it's been in the process of being repaired at the moment. This is the Team Legit FG36 wing. Absolutely brilliant. Those of you which remember this one from one of the RC Funny Farm, or the first episode of the year of the RC Funny Farm, flew it for a tree, ripped one of the that winglet off, and it carried on flying. Absolutely brilliant. However, when I first bought this wing, I also bought a Cobra motor for this. I think it was the Cobra 2221 1870 kV. Loaded it up with a 7x4, maybe 7x5 prop on the back. And family friendly, did that thing go across the flight line. It absolutely hauled. Mental fast. Faster than the Typhoon by about a country mile. Ridiculous. But the noise on it was ridiculous. And I mean like screamy, stupidly loud. To the point I couldn't fly it. Any of the flying sites because it was just too noisy. And that's the thing, is that if you're in the United States and you're flying out in Arizona, in a desert, or in Texas, somewhere like that, you don't give a family friendly about the noise, you know? You've got nobody to annoy. But here in the United Kingdom, we've got someone literally just like one field over, willing to make a complaint. So we do have to be considerate of our neighbours. So my FG36 didn't get flown for quite a period of time. So
I was thinking, well, no, it flew really well. I feel really bad because it's a nice wing. I wanted one for ages and now I've got it. And Matt, you're not flying it. Change the motor. I was like, right, what am I going to change it to? And then instantly hit me. We've heard about the D2826 and a 6-inch propeller, 30 amp ESC. Brilliant motor and prop combination. We heard about the Texumo with the D3536 1450 kV with an 8x6 for 4S or a 9x6 for 3S and a 40 amp ESC, I hasten to add. Really, really good prop combo. We haven't really heard about the 2205 motors, but I'm sure that you know that 5-inch if it's 2300 kV, it's a 5-inch prop of some form. If it's 3S, then it's a 6-inch prop or what other form on there. The one other motor and prop combination, and I use this and I have used this extensively. It is just such a great motor and such a great prop combination. And I'm hyping this one up because it really is that good. It's the Sunny Sky and it's the X2216 1250 kV. So if we think about this for a moment, we're going back at the beginning, we were chatting about the KVs, is that 1250, Matt, that's quite low. On the scalings, that's quite low. So it's not going to be very fast. And you're absolutely right. So we need to put an 8-inch propeller on it if it's 4S, or an 8x6 propeller on it if it's 4S, or a 9x6 on there if it's 3S. And that motor and those prop combinations, all run with a 40 amp ESC, I hasten to add, are the go-to motor and prop combinations for the XUAV Mini Talon, which we'll take a look at in a moment. And the Mini Talon will cruise around 40 miles an hour for about 4 amps, which is absolutely brilliant. Imagine if you could cruise around at 40 miles an hour for 4 amps on there. Absolutely brilliant. And again, the one thing which we didn't really mention, I didn't stress back at the beginning about the propellers, is that the bigger the propeller, generally speaking, the lower the prop noise. The smaller the propeller, generally spins an awful lot faster and can get very, very screamy, especially on the back of a wing where the air's coming through and getting disrupted. So that 1870 kV motor was absolutely screaming back here on a smaller prop, and it was making far too much noise. I've swapped it over to the Sunny Sky motor, and I can fly this one around for about 12 to 15 minutes depending on the weather conditions, and I can, with a 2200 4S battery pack, and I can have so much fun with it, and it hardly makes any noise at all. Well, it makes a fraction compared to what it was before. So the Sunny Sky with an 8-inch prop, 8x6 on 3S, or a 9x6 on 4S, 9x6 on 3S, sorry, is a brilliant combo. 40 amp ESC, and you're going to get shed loads of flight time with it, and you're going to have loads and loads of fun, and it is a very quiet motor and prop combo, even on the back end of a wing like the FG36, and that has transformed that from a wing which was just sat up here on the shelf to a model which now actually gets flown. Brilliant. Right, let's move on. I've got a couple more examples for you, and then we will be wrapping up. Let's talk 3D models or slow fly models. Like I said, I grabbed as many to give you as examples as possible. So this one is the one which I've really annoyingly forgot what it's called. This is a 1450 kV motor with an 8x45 slow fly propeller. You'll see on the top camera up there, it's a slow fly propeller. The reason why it's a slow fly propeller is because it's a very slow flying model. Okay, so that's the reason why I went for that one. Mid kV on there, and yeah, 3S, good fun. 10 minutes of flying around the sky. This one is a bit of an oddity. This one is a 1400 kV motor. Bigger can, not very deep though. I can't remember the exact specifications on that. All I know it's a 1400 kV, 8x45 propeller. Again, this is a 3D model. I think I run this with a 10 amp ESC as well. Brilliant fun. Again, it's just for flying 3D. And I'll maybe get 10 minutes if I'm really lucky out of that one. Also, again, trying to stay with examples on there. Again, a 2826 motor on the front of here. That is a 1100 kV motor on the front. this motor is underpropped with an 8x4 prop, and the reason why it's underpropped is because I had the choice of either an 8x4.5 or a 10x4.7 prop, so either an 8-inch prop or a 10-inch prop. This model had the ESC burnout on it last time because somebody put a 2000 kV motor on there with an 8-inch propeller on it, completely burnt out. There's a video on YouTube of it, me running across the field to it because it's been caught on fire. So that one is underpropped. It flies really well, so I'm not going to be changing it. So yeah, 1100 kV for that one with an 8-inch propeller. Does seem to work quite well. Again, that's on 3S for that. Last three models, and then we're going to be wrapping up. Right, there's the Harrier, which I'm sure many of you have seen before. I've got a wild card to throw at you. That is the Reptile Sky Shadow S800 V2, and the only difference between the V1 and the V2 is that they changed the colour of the foam. That was it. That's that side. I don't know if you can see back here, I've got a strange motor. Most people put quad motors on the back of here. I started with a quad motor on the back of here. Can you see what I've got written on the back of there? It's an A2212, so 22 wide, 12 deep, so not very big at all. 1400 kV. There's an oddity there. That's right in the middle of the range. That isn't like 2300 kV. It's not a really low kV. It's like the middle of the lane. And I've got a broken 7x5 propeller on there. And I also fly this one on 4S as well. Now, the reason why I've got that motor and that prop combo on there is because what I was finding is that I wasn't flying the S800 fast. I was always in the very bottom of the stick range on the throttle. So that kind of led me to think that maybe I could put a slightly more efficient motor on there. So I lowered the kV, I made the propeller a little bit bigger, and yes, when this motor and prop combo is going together, it does pull more than the 30 amp ESC can take on the back. Now the thing is that I now know that in the back of my head. If I'm going to run this one on full knacker, I keep to it about 10 seconds, or across the field, and then take my thumbs off the throttle so that I don't end up cooking the motor or the ESC or the bearings in the motor itself, or battery I don't really care about that much. So this one is a bit of a wild card for those S800 pilots out there. Lower kV, bigger propeller, better efficiency at the lower ends, which is, again, this is how I normally fly in this model. You can see the mud which it's got on its nose is that I'm normally flying it really down low, below hedge level, the vast majority of the time, but I'm not flying it fast. That said, I can give it full knacker. It's got loads of punch in it, obviously because it's an overprop motor. It will pull the amps and it will absolutely scoot along. But again, I'm talking 15 minutes worth of flight time for some really, really good fun. So yeah, I have an odd motor and prop combo on there. And that's the thing, once you work out what motors go well together and you get your head around those KVs and the prop sizes, is that sometimes you can bend your own rules. Okay, so technically that should not go together, but it works, and it works for me because I know the limits of that motor and that prop combo, and for this model specifically, and I set it up on purpose this way for the conditions in which I fly it. So yeah, that's always a good example, because it's one of those wild cards like the Z84, which we saw earlier. Remember, that one only had a 1000 kV motor on it, which would normally mean bigger prop, bigger 8-inch prop, 9-inch prop, or even 10-inch prop. No, instead I had a 6-inch propeller, and that was purely down to efficiency. So hey ho. We mentioned about twin motor models. This is the Harrier. I'm sure many of you have already seen the Maiden and the FPV flights for this one. Oh, give you a quick heads up, it did have a vector in there. I've taken it out, and I'll explain that in a later video. Anyway, this model will cruise for 50 miles an hour for 10, and I mean just 10 amps, which I think is pretty good for a twin motor model. Now, I actually got the description wrong. That is an X2212 1400 kV motor with 8x6 propellers on there, which is over-propped by about an inch, I should only really be using 7-inch propellers with those motors. Okay, so you saw 1400 kV. You already now know that Matt is over-propping stuff, sometimes on purpose. I did that. I've used this now numerous flights. I've given it many a hot supper, and these motors have just come down very, very lukewarm, if that. So I know that I'm not pushing them to the limits. I haven't been able to check the ESCs because I'm only using a 30 amp ESC in there, but that combo has worked really, really well for me. So that was the 2212 1400 kV with 8x6s. Now, just be aware, you normally wouldn't run it with an 8x6 propeller. You would normally run it with a 7-inch or less. A 7-inch propeller for these. That said, a couple of considerations here. Size, twin motors, so you couldn't go any. You'd be pushing it if you went up to a 9-inch propeller. It would fit on there, but you're going to have the props getting very, very close to each other, and that causes inefficiencies. So I've stuck with an 8-inch propeller. That has worked really, really well for me. You could, of course, if your name's Andrew from the Facebook group, cut these off and stick one big motor on the back of there. Maybe say a 1100 kV motor, nice big propeller on the back, and then get super efficient out of it as well. But for me, like I said, I have had an Eagle Tree Vector in here, but for me, this really is a smash in and around the trees model. I know that may upset some of you, but that's what I'm going to be using it for. I have tried a Vector in it. It's nice. Like I said, 10 amps for 50 miles an hour. Not bad at all. And that leaves us with one last model. And this one is the Mini Talon. And like I was saying, I'm going to put it around the wrong way round. The last motor, which we're going to talk about here, is the Sunny Sky X22 16 1250 kV motor. I know it's an expensive motor. It's about 15 quid. But you cannot get a better motor and prop combo for the Mini Talon specifically, because an 8x6 fits perfectly on the back. It won't scrape on the ground when you land because the fin's in the way. It will cruise 40 miles an hour for 4 amps. Absolutely brilliant. It's got the punch there where you need it. Set it up with a 40 amp ESC. That said, that's a 60 amp ESC, which I've got on the back of mine. Corking motor and prop combo, and like you've already seen me say here a couple of times, is that I've had that same motor and prop combo on numerous different models here as well. So I had it on the Spec Wing. I've got it over there on an Edge 540. What else have I got it on? Oh, they had the Mini Talon. It was on the front of there, and I've used it on other models as well. Really, really good motor and prop combo, to say the least. Right. So I am just going to take a quick look at your questions, and it is going to time for us to wrap up, unfortunately. So I'll tell you what, I'm just going to move the Mini Talon out of the way. Yeah, if you want to know what the best motor is for a Mini Talon, X20 Sunny Sky X22 16 1250 kV. So I'll just move this one out of the way. Oh, I didn't mention. How did you nobody mention Suicide Bunny? Right. This is, sorry, two more. Micro Sky Hunter, a small little model. We can fit a 1300 kV motor in the back, 1300 3S or maybe 4S in the nose. Brilliant for FPV. The only time you really kill them is that when you break the booms. Anyway, that side. Normally, most people would put a 2205, and there's me trying to pick a bit out of the back. 2205 motor on the back. That's the 2206, I think, 2300 kV. Absolute screams. Rips the sky, an extra one, brilliant fun. So once you know the rules, okay, so that's 2300 kV, 6x4 prop, 30 amp ESC, great for 3S, brilliant fun on 4S. If it burns out, I don't care, because it's slightly overpropped for the kV. Or one final tip is that generally speaking, when you go between a 3S battery and a 4S battery, you reduce the prop size by 1 inch. So ideally, if I was running that on 3S, I'd have a 6x4 prop on it. If I was running it on 4S, I'd have a 5x45 or 5x4 propeller on it. You would drop 1 inch on the propeller, and that should normally just keep you within the current range. Anyway, like I said, once you know the rules, you then know how to break them. So when you have a very small airframe model, and then you stick a stupidly powerful motor on the back. So on the back of here is a Cobra 2814 10 turn 1700 kV motor. This is, I'm going to go on record and say it's the world's fastest micro sky munter. Guess 100 miles an hour plus. 7x5 propeller on the back, just so that you can see out there I'm not mucking around with the numbers. And it is ridiculously fast. There's some videos on my YouTube channel on this one. Launching it is a bit of a nightmare because you've got to give it like a proper javelin throw to get it in the sky. But it is bonkers fast. Good for about 3 laps. 3 laps around our flying site. Battery's dead. Motor's crazy hot. Great fun. And again, that's the kind of things which you can do, and I would have never have dreamt of back at the very beginning when I first started this hobby. I just didn't know what the difference is or was between these different motors, and I just didn't have a clue. And that's why I'm saying to you that there's 3-4 different combos out there, which are, again, I've documented, and if you press show more underneath this video and go and take a look, is that those 3 combos will get you, that will cover the vast majority of the models which you'll come across on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, there's always exceptions to the rule, that you'll have some odd model and you don't know what it is, and you may be wondering, well, Matt, I've got this model, like an Edge 540T, what should I put in it? And the simplest thing is to get onto the Googler and see what other people have been putting in their models. Another source of information is pop in the, again, shameless plug, for the Facebook group. There's a link to that in the video description. There's literally over 2,500 pilots, cool pilots like me and you in that group now, and they are so helpful. So if you get stuck, chances are somebody already owns the model which you're talking about or have got, and you'll get one or more replies on suggestions on different props and motors which you could be using for your model specifically. Right. Last couple of questions to get answered on what's on there. Jonathan says, so what's your favourite FPV aircraft? I don't have one. I have many, in short. Picking on the mini Talon, for example, you can cover serious distances. It's very chilled. It's sit back, cup of coffee next to the chair, sit there flying, goggles on, sip of coffee, absolutely brilliant. It could be the Sidewinder, it could be Suicide Bunny, because they go stupidly fast in one shot. I like most of their things FPV, so yeah, I don't have one favourite. I have a collection of favourites, and I know that's a very not like the answer which you were looking for, but it just depends upon the situation, what I'm flying and what I want to be doing at that point in time. So yeah, I haven't avoided the question. I'm just being very realistic with you, Jonathan. It depends upon the scenario and what my favourite is for the different scenarios. And again, anyway, let's move on. Right, Ken says, bloody hell, where is Matt getting all these models from? Now you know why I complain about not having very much office space left in here, and why I had to have a clear out of models, last year. So quite a few models did go. What you've seen here are some of my favourites which have stayed in shorts, and I'm sure that will go up very, very quickly. Daniel says, hey Matt, what happened to the Sonic Model HD? So that's the Sonic Model HD, was the, what was it, the Ready-Made RC Wacko, or something like that, or it's the Skyray by Hobby King. They all came out the same mould, basically. That has actually gone on to a new home. That's gone on to Austin to replace his completely shagged previous version. He had the Skyray, he had the Hobby King version, which was the Skyray. It's actually gone on to Austin to a new home, and you'll probably see it in some of the videos when we're at the Funny Farm very shortly. So yeah, it's gone on to a new home for that one. By the way, don't take it as like a bad model. I slope sawed that one with 5200 4S pack in it, and it did really well. Well, it did really well once I put the battery forwards, because I managed to make it tip stall. That aside, very, very efficient in the sky, great model. And if I owned that model, and that was the only model which I had for doing some distance, I'd be very pleased with it. It is a very, very nice model. For me, unfortunately, it was too much of a middle ground model. I've got other models which can do that kind of thing better, aka the Mini Talon, for example, for that kind of flying. So that's why it found a new home, in short. So good question, by the way. So a quick look. Elijah says, I feel that this was inspired by my post about 5x4x3s or 6.5s on a red bottom. Yeah, Elijah, it was yourself. There was, and again, the where this video came from was from your questions. I had numerous questions come in from the chat at the workbench a couple of nights ago about motors. There was numerous questions in the Facebook group as well. So this is where that video came from. Is that was just me picking up comments and questions coming in from you as an RC community, hence tonight's live episode to cover this topic. And again, for me to give you as many, give you the basics and as many examples as possible with real life models, so you can understand my kind of choices when it came to motors, propellers and ESCs. Right. Oh, someone's been deleted by Lauren, naughty boy. So a quick look on there. In the beginning, right. Anna Ardenell says, in the beginning, I had a hard time when people said, get a 2200 kV motor without saying the can size. Yeah, it's really confusing, isn't it? You've got this can size, you've got this kV, you've got propellers. One of those three combinations down in the video description. They'll get you through the vast... One of those three combinations would fit all of those models which you've seen here tonight, okay? They cover so many different bases. Even that Sunny Sky motor, which we mentioned, I've had one of those on the back of a Micro Sky Hunter with an 8-inch prop. Absolutely bonkers. But you just need to go careful of the old torque roll when you launch it, because you've got a very big propeller on a very thin chord model. So you have to throw it very, very hard with about medium throttle. Anyway, we're going off topic. Right. Austin says, I love... So that was Austin we were chatting about a few moments ago. You can see his chat down there. I love the Mako stroke Skyro stroke HD. Absolutely. That really is Austin's model. And Austin, we all have very fond memories of going 1, 2, 3, 4 over a bridge, 5, 6, 7 fields away to get the last one from last year. Remember that one? Yeah, absolutely brilliant ones. Right, on that note, it is time for me to wrap up. If you have any questions about props, ESCs, or motors, I'm actually going to suggest that the video description comments area is not the best place to ask. And the reason why I'm saying that's not the best place to ask is because that relies upon me replying to you. And that is not the best idea because you'll have to wait for ages. Instead, there's a link to the Facebook group in the video description. Nip across to Faceballs, press the join button on the right-hand side of the screen, and one of the moderators, will pick up your request, and you can join in with the group. Give you a heads up, there are a couple of giveaways going on in the group there today. We have a Micro Sky Hunter, which is being given away, and we've got 2 S800s also being given away at the moment. And I can also tell you there is a Sky Dancer, there's a Zoe HD Orbit Wing, and there is also a pair of FPV goggles to be given away in the next couple of days as well. So that's all going on only in the Facebook group too. And also a shameless plug for Instagram. There's a link to that down in the video description. There's a new model which has been turned up here. And for me to say it's cute would be very much an understatement. And I may do a cheeky, I mean a cheeky, unboxing in a later video very, very shortly, and it might already be built. But we'll get to that one, because it does look really cute. I can't wait to get that one out. Right, Lauren does look like she is having fun. So a big thank you to Lauren, our moderator here, which you wouldn't have seen in the chat, but she's been a good girl and kicked a few people out by the looks of it during our live chat tonight. So thank you, Lauren. I really do appreciate your help, madam. Right, on that note, it is time for me to go. I can all but say a massive thank you to you for taking the time to watch this episode. I wholeheartedly hope that this episode has been and helped you as an RC fixed wing pilot. And the reason why I say that is because when I first started, I found this all very, very confusing. And I've been able to help you, then for me, that's thumbs up. So on that note, it's time for me to go. I can't say much more. Before I go, we are having an RC coffee chat on Wednesday. I have, again, big thanks to you again. Those of you in the Facebook group, I asked what questions would you like answered. That thread had like a ton of comments on it. I will be doing my best to go through your questions and comments in the RC coffee chat. There's a couple of other topics which I want to bring up as well, but we will be focusing upon you again in this week's RC coffee chat, and that comes from the comments, the questions thread, which is also in the Facebook group as well. Last one is, if you've enjoyed this episode, do me a favor, press the thumbs up. Remember, I don't run adverts on the 99% of all these videos which are on YouTube. You can support this channel. There's affiliate links down in the video description if you feel that you want to help this channel and me and what we do. It ragged the nuts off. Anyway, I've talked far too much. Big thank you to you for taking the time to watch this video. I'm off now. Have a great evening, good morning, afternoon, or whatever time of day it is with you. From myself, Matt, cheerios.